Welcome inside another edition of SVG SportsTech On Demand, the series that's taking you around the sports technology world to talk to some of the key leaders in technology in live sports production. And we're here to talk to one of our favorite companies, LiveU, and one of our favorite people, Janel Fleming. She's Director of Sales and Sales Group Manager for Sports at LiveU. Janel, it's always a pleasure. How you doing?
Thanks, Brandon. Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for taking the time. You guys have been very active, very busy in what has been a wild 12 to 13 months in the sports video production world, adapting to the world that we're all in there right now. Wanted to talk to you a little bit about that aggressive move that many people made to the world of REMI at-home production. Not to say it wasn't something that was already occurring prior to the pandemic, but boy, did it get on steroids when people were kind of forced into this model, or just to helpfully guide it along. And you and your company were very much there to help along a lot of clients along the way, perhaps most notably the pretty well-timed release of the LU800. Tell us a little bit about that product and how you're seeing it impact how people are adapting their live event production workflows into more of a REMI at home, home run model, whatever you want to call it.
Sure. So LiveU has been doing wireless at home production, or what I consider a wireless at home production, where cameras are, married to a backpack encoder, and we've been backhauling video sources to a centralized location for a number of years. And it's primarily to production companies and smaller organizations, colleges that are looking to broadcast more of their out-year sports but didn't want to go to the building out a production truck and that sort of thing, or outsourcing it to a sports packager. So we've been doing this for many years. And so in our roadmap prior to the pandemic was the LU800, because we saw oftentimes that customers were rolling up and they didn't necessarily need to manage 4, 8, 12 backpacks. They'd like it in a smaller, less footprint on site. So the LU800 came, and with that, we also were able to build a newer backpack unit that was compatible with the newest 5G network rollout and the modems that were coming online, in the near future. As of, I guess it's now really truly we have 5G networks, but there's still a lot more ways to go. We also looked into quality and more reliability, even in our bonding algorithm, because with this, this now carrying multi-inputs, which is what the LU800 is, right? It's a multi-input encoder. It does require some tweaking to our LRT proprietary transport protocol. Of course, it's going to require higher bit rates of streaming, and with that, even lower latency, because most often customers who are adopting at-home production, their directors and their TDs are so used to being, almost no latency when they're talking to their camera operators or cutting between different shots. So with bonded cellular, there's always that traditional mindset of like, wait a second, like I tried this 5 years ago, I had to have 10-second delay. I mean, that's not the reality we live in with bonded cellular today, which is, it was one of those things that, the pandemic, that changing of the mind, I think with the pandemic, like it accelerated people having to depend on LiveU, depended on bonded cellular. So I think that we when you mention at home production, I think all of that also accelerated. So people who had always thought about doing a REMI production now are sort of forced to do it. And I think that we're not going to go back. Like I watched a Blockbuster documentary on Netflix, and like how, when people were like going to a Blockbuster, and like there was nothing better, right? You're in it, you smell the popcorn and everything. Like you couldn't imagine that ever going away. And then you're streaming, and you can actually get it to your home, and you get more out of it. I think there's some parallels to at-home production in that. So in my mind, we came at the perfect time. The LU800, we had our big announcement actually almost a year ago. I think June was when we announced it. So it's now been sort of in the market for, it didn't ship till a little bit later, but in the market for almost a year. And we've got some great wins and some really cool projects we've been a part of in this last year, even given the circumstances.
Yeah, and I would love to get more of your thoughts on 5G, as that's, something that was certainly on the roadmap for a really long time. And now people are, seems to be starting to understand more of what it can unlock and make capable. And it's, it's more than just making your phone fast. It's like, okay, it dramatically impacts how we can produce things behind the scenes, as people have kind of turn pretty sharply to you guys and say, you have a 5G solution, right? Maybe what are they looking to do with it? And maybe what are some of the potentials that are exciting for you as you watch clients kind of experiment with this more?
Yeah, it's interesting because we've been experimenting in the two sort of 5G environments, the sub-6 world and the millimeter world, like network slicing world. So there's really like two situations that we've been able to sort of see the brilliance of that is the 5G network and what can be done in this environment. One of the biggest thing is just reducing the latency of, point-to-point connection. So we've been doing stuff with Fox Sports and Verizon, and they've deployed, in there, especially, going towards March Madness for college basketball, we were able to actually do, 5G, transmission out of a arena with within the Verizon network with a millimeter wave network modem connected to the unit and squeeze down latency and see the performance level. So I think what it's bringing to customers is just more security in your video stream and we're becoming more dependent on the IP encoders in the field, because I think oftentimes we talk about IP, we're thinking in our studio and enhancements, but we're not always considering, the first mile and remotes coming in over IP and over sort of a non-traditional managed network. So I think what 5G is bringing is that secure and reliability that that the network and the upload speeds are there, especially in the millimeter wave world where they're deploying these in these venues. But even in that sub-6 sort of consumer grade 5G rollout, we are seeing an enhancement to what is already a very reliable LTE network in many areas and cities. We're seeing even more higher bit rates, lower latencies. We're seeing in the radio access networks true 5G deployment that is having an impact on performance. So I think people are able to depend on these units in linear broadcasts, where they used to only use LiveU encoders in the OTT space for their nonlinear projects. And now they're seeing it, the value, the cost savings, and the different things you can do with it and different places you can go, you can cover more and you can do it in addition. So even covering shoulder programming for social media and that sort of thing, there's just been more reliance and we're becoming a more dependable solution. And the carriers it's only going to continue to get better as what I'm saying. And even though everything was kind of stalled, I think now that the adoption of an IP encoder, is so widely accelerated in the last, year, we're going to see, more efficiencies in what else we can put across that connection. Aside from video, we rolled out an IP pipe feature, which is a layer 2 connection that rides alongside the video, which allows you to do camera control or control really any IP network-based gear in the field. And we're seeing, more advancements on edge computing, especially within like an AWS environment and loading our MMH software within the cloud stack, so you can do cloud switching, which is still something that people are exploring and playing with. But I think 5G will really bring that to another level in the near future.
Yeah, it's that exciting point now where we're not talking about it just in theory anymore. We're actually seeing people do it, but there's still, like you said, so much growth and potential still left there on the horizon. So it's a really exciting time. Also really exciting times for you guys at LiveU. You've been kind of striking some cool partnerships to kind of expand the availability and the accessibility to what your technology provides. Who are some of the companies that you're working with, and maybe some of the clients that have really benefited from some of these new toys that you have rolled out?
Yeah, so we've been partnering with a number of cloud production environments, so Grabio, Grass Valley AMP, and more recently Blackbird. So we're continuing to be more tightly integrated with some of the industry leaders in that space. We've been working really closely with Verizon on their edge computing solutions. We're also working with even camera manufacturers. So we've recently did a partnership with BirdDog to sort of couple our units with their PTZ cameras, because with the IP pipe feature that I mentioned, you can now, send out a pack, to somebody's home or talent who's calling an event remotely with a higher end camera, and not have them be technical experts or engineers in order to configure this, right? You can set this up so that you can do everything from your control room, transmit back to your studio or an event or a production truck and do everything remotely. So we're excited about, continuing building out. We also recently acquired Garland Partners, a UK-based channel team, and they've done a lot of stuff in the UK and Europe, and it's just widening our presence in that market, which we've been out. They've been one of our resellers for a number of years, so getting just closely tighter with the customers there, especially the sports customers, because they've been leaning on sports solutions more and more in Europe. So we're excited to see what they can bring to us and what we can bring to them, and see where the partnership goes.
Sure. Last question before we let you go. It's an interesting point now. We're about 13 months into this whole thing, and a lot of people have experimented with new things, maybe gotten comfortable with things. You talked a little bit earlier about how some of the REMI models probably aren't going away. But when you work with clients now and you look ahead to the next 6 to 12 months, which I know is a lot to ask of anybody these days, there's also this light at the end of the tunnel that maybe we can get back to that kind of like nostalgic place that you were talking about. As people are kind of standing in both camps right now, working remote, seeing light at the end of the tunnel, wondering what it's going to be like when we do get fans in the stands. And there is that more tangible temptation to go back to the way things were. As you look ahead to the next 6 to 12 months, how do you see it potentially playing out, and where are you guys going? Are you thinking that a lot of these things that have taken place over the past year or so are going to stick for the long haul?
I think most of it's going to stick for the long haul because people are seeing real financial benefits of the workflows.
Sure.
I think a couple things, like maybe in the tier 1 space, we'll have people calling the events on site, and certain things will come back to normal. But for the sports market that I cover, which is primarily the tier 2, tier 3 sports, I think that they are really going to look to keep some of the models they've adopted because it is more efficient. Efficiency is always going to be the goal for any industries. So this, like I said, accelerated the adoption of REMI production, and it was always going to get to this point. So I think that for the most part, we're going to be streaming from home instead of going to Blockbuster. I just think that's, it's just the new reality. And I think that some things like, we're still going to have the need for having, trucks and trailers on site for certain programming. But for LiveU, we're really investing in what we think is going to stay. And that's, doing different elements of the production from home. I mean, you don't necessarily need to build out even a centralized control room with all of your staff in that central location, right? You can now build, directors and producers and graphic operators in their own homes to do things, and not have to pay them to travel to a central location. So you can take advantage of talented individuals, and they can move to places they want to live and not necessarily have to live on the coastal cities where most of this, production is done. So I think the advantages are going to sort of steer everyone to kind of stick to a little bit of the status quo that's been established in the pandemic times.
Yeah. Wonderful insights as always from Janel Fleming. She is Director of Sales and Sales Group Manager for Sports at LiveU. Don't have to tell you to check out what they're up to. You probably have already, but certainly see what they're up to lately, and definitely check out the new LU800. Janel, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for taking the time, and we look forward to catching up with you soon.
Thanks, Brandon. Thanks, SVG.
All right. For more of everything going on in our SVG SportsTech On Demand series and other interviews with leaders from around the industry, head on over to sportsvideo.org.